enjoyed very much what you told us. I'm glad you gave me another resource to use when I'm doing research on AI. And actually, I use Copilot, not trying to advertise them by saying their name, but they're available for everybody. Actually, some people said, from the way you talk about AI, someone will think that they're going to take Shahada. I said, well, mine took Shahada already. It learned what I like and dislike, and it's always responding to me based on past conversation I had with it. So is that what we usually should expect? Or can we train the AI that we're using, the AI platform that we're using?
Yeah, you can definitely customize it and change it and improve it. There are mechanisms like adding more sources, an operation called fine-tuning, and of course you can train what's called your large language model from scratch. That's a very expensive process. It costs hundreds of millions of dollars. Fine-tuning can cost much less than that. The idea of, I remember I asked Ansari early on, are you Muslim? And it gave me, once it said yes. And then these things are a bit random. And another time it said, I am just an AI chatbot. I don't have any beliefs per se. And when you actually dive deep into how these work, you realize that I think the best description I've heard of them is stochastic parrots. They're kind of like parrots. It's like asking, does a parrot have iman if it says la ilaha illallah, right? Like, it's an equivalent question. And so I don't really think the fact that it says the shahada makes it Muslim any more than a parrot saying a shahada makes it Muslim in the same sense of human Islam, not in the sense of all creation worshipping Allah. Second question is Ansari free? The answer is yes. And it's free in both the sense of no money, but free also in the sense that it's open, that you can download the source code for it and run it yourself. So I think that's Copilot, for those who don't know, is a product from a company called GitHub that programmers around the world use. And it's been demonstrated, outside of just the Qur'an, this technology is immensely powerful in the sense that it's making programmers in randomized control trials twice as efficient as other people, as people not using Copilot. That's kind of an amazing statistic. And it would be so lovely if we could bring that same efficiency to activities like translation. And I'm honored to be talking with Dr. Dr. Saheb has joined us. He's such a luminary in the field. Something that I'm really, really interested in. If we can just make the cost of translations 1/100th of what it is now, that's another example of how these technologies could change things. But ... I don't want us to forget about the ... that come after, of course.
Thank you.
I believe Ali Zahid has a question.
Hey, Assalamu alaikum. Yeah, I have a question for you. I'm really impressed by the overall website, honestly, and I've made something similar. And I wanted to ask you, what have you fine-tuned the model you're using, and what data did you use for that?
Yeah, we have not fine-tuned the model. We use multiple sources of information. So the three main sources are hadith collections, Qur'an collections, and most recently Al-Mawsu' al-Fiqhiyya, which is a publication from the Kuwaiti Awqaf. 30% of our questions were about fiqh, and the Al-Mawsu' al-Fiqhiyya is 18,000 pages, but it is ecumenical. It does cover all of the topics, so that's why we added it. Right now, fine-tuning is a little unclear. We still don't have yet enough data to do that, and it's not clear what a better answer is. So that makes fine-tuning difficult.
I understand.
Yeah. In terms of other places, there's a website called deen.ai that lists all of the Islamic assistants that are being built, plus all of the data and all of the evaluation that exists. So for example, we have as part of the Ansari project, there's a data set of, say, 100 questions that if you build one of these Islamic assistants, you can test it, make sure that it answers the questions correctly. Are there any practical applications you recommend of Quran and AI or Islam? The one I'm really interested in is the one that I think is most promising. There's two most promising. One is education and one is translation. For me, those are the two kind of most interesting applications in terms of their impact. Yeah, but I still think it's early days and it will take the Ummah a while to come to terms with this technology.
Does Ansari primarily research the Quran, or can it give Islamic perspectives on any topic?
So we've done an analysis. So, Ansari's been open. I think in total more than 12,000 questions have been asked. So we've run an analysis on the classification. And roughly the order of preference is fiqh questions first, and then Quran questions second. And that's why the source we went after is al-Mawsu' al-Fiqhiyya, to strengthen it on that particular aspect. It's not perfect, and I keep wanting to emphasize that. The way I've described Ansari is it's kind of like a second-year school at a fiqh academy, a second-year school student at a fiqh academy. They know enough, but they probably know enough to cause problems as well as to fix them and be useful. So if you could make like a second-year graduate of a fiqh academy like available to everyone in the world, what would the benefits of that be? And we both understand in doing that there's a risk as well as a benefit. And so really what we have to do is work out how to balance those two things.
Yes, I have a comment, if you don't mind. I just want to bring to everybody's attention, since we're mentioning translations. I want everybody to know that some of us are trying to use AI for Quran translation. My personal experience is you always have to go back and use your human intelligence to read what AI gave you and make sure you approve that translation. Don't pass along a translation done by AI without revising it, without revisiting it, without putting your own comments and your own correction into it. AI might become more perfect, but today it's not. And this is from practical experience, because I use AI every day. You still need your own input into a Quran translation, regardless who's doing it. Even if AI advance, we still need to reread it. And for all the Quran translators participating with us, I want to let you know that we have a group of Quran scholars and scientists committee already there in place with Iqra. If you like to submit your translation and my translation and everybody else's translation that's available, we will let them review them and propose one common one that they approve. And then we can put that online for everybody to refer to as one endorsed by a committee of Quran scholars and scientists. That will be done for the first time, I think, and it will be a great help for those who are converting to Islam or reverting to Islam, and for those Muslims that don't speak Arabic and like to read a translation to understand the Quran. Thank you very much.
If I may just add a comment on that.
Go ahead.
I don't think we should use AI for translating the Quran. That's not its value. The Quran is too valuable to be trusted to AI.
Yes.
But some of the tafsirs, the tertiary sources of hadith, some of these things that have never been able, the wealth of Arabic books that have never been available in English, these kind of things where it's less important and, it's written in a much more accessible language many times. That's the type of thing that I think we should be targeting for this. And kind of an AI translated Quran to me does not have any advantage over a human translated Quran. But I see Dr. Sohaib also has his hand raised.
Yeah, Jazakallah khairan for your kind words before, and it's my honor to work with you. I'm actually really pleased. I'm sure this applies to others who are participating, who are experts in their field, are contributing in major organizations and corporations, and have in their heart this love for the Quran and this wish to do something for the sake of Allah and to participate with others in doing that. I think this is a really exciting moment. I'm going to share a bit more about that in the next session, inshallah. I have a question which pertains to what you were showing us, in your conversation with the bot, and you were saying, is there a travel dua? And then when it failed to notice it, just with a little prompting, it got there, right? So this is a very, low level kind of gap, or in other cases, hallucinations that you showed us as well, which you can then sort of prompt it and correct it. Now, how do you see this in terms of like a bigger trajectory if we are trying to get AI to do more and more complex things, things which, it may be getting things wrong, it may be missing things, but it be more and more difficult for someone to spot that something has gone wrong and to be able to prompt and correct. Is this something where, where there is potentially a solution? Does it involve, more and more human expertise at higher levels? Do you have a sense of what might be a direction, a practical direction that could solve this kind of thing?
We're starting to explore that in various domains. I think if you can, so first thing to note, these things are getting much better, much more quickly than any previous AI technology. So what is true about the systems today, probably a year from now, may not necessarily be true and may not be true in the same way. So to some extent, we probably don't have to solve this problem ourselves. The technology will improve. But another thing is human revision. So we're looking at a project with, still in the discussion phases, with the Qur'an Foundation, where we are looking at having humans review the answers that Ansari generates, and then putting that in essentially making it searchable. So when it tries to produce a new answer, the first thing it does is, what questions have I answered before that are similar to this, that have been human reviewed, and it will give a stronger preference to those. That's actually very doable in the case of, say, when you're focusing on Qur'an or you're focusing on a particular verse. By constraining the domain, that becomes possible. It's a little harder to do when you can ask any question above the sky and, above the earth and below the sky. But for constrained domains, and this is, I consider Ansari an experimental testbed that will have multiple projects that spin out of it, including ones that are more conservative, deliberately so, but possibly have a larger audience. And that it can be used as a source to increase the trust. Dr. Saib, yeah.
Yeah, just so we don't lose the train of thought, I was wanting just to follow up briefly. So I think that, we're looking at examples of asking a simple question, getting a straight answer. But maybe, the way that we're going to be thinking about AI is to perform more complex investigations, which are not so simple for someone, even the most expert humans, to just verify and correct. Essentially, it might be telling us things that cannot really be known through manual methods, right? Let's say you ask, at the moment, you could ask a computer to do a very, very complex calculation, and really, to attempt to do that on a manual basis without the computer might take many years with whole departments working on it, but the computer is capable of generating it within seconds, perhaps. So what I'm thinking about is, is it the case that by maybe fixing the problems at the low level, we feel confident then that more complex answers on deeper questions about the Qur'an, we can then rely on them without having to check them? Yeah. Or at the moment, do we still feel that kind of confidence would be misplaced?
There are advanced techniques called agentic approaches, called things like chain of thought or tree of thought, for those who are in the field, where rather than trying to give you a single answer at a time, it applies some kind of methodology. It might first come up with a plan for how to answer the question, present its logic to you, and then show itself executing that plan. It might then take a moment to reflect on that plan and think about it again. So this research, what are called agentic technologies, and by opening up their reasoning to humans, and this is actually one of the things that we are working on in Ansari v3. Ansari v2 is almost finished, but these agentic approaches where it doesn't just give you an answer, it gives you how it arrived at the answers, the steps of logic that it undertook, the reflection stage that it did to evaluate its answer once it put it together, really opens up that possibility and allows you to see the logic and to change the logic and to change the plan. You can say something like, Well, your plan is almost right, but I would use source B instead of source A. And that agentic is kind of like the next stage of evolution of these Islamic assistants. But it's going to take a lot of work. And as you know, as someone at the forefront of is really interested in this field, this is something that I'm very interested in exploring, but it's highly experimental at this stage.
Hi, everyone. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I want to thank Dr. Waleed for his work in democratizing not only the technology, but I think hopefully the Quran. I wanted to ask, though, that a sort of tangentially related question, which is, I wanted to know what your feelings are about some of the, you pointed out some of the challenges of AI and some of the potential pitfalls, which is, I feel like, unusual and incredibly, incredibly. I'm not getting the right word, but it's incredibly forthright of you to do so. But one of the things that I wanted to ask you is what your thoughts are on the criticisms around the increased power usage of AI in general, not just with regards to the Quran, the potential negatives of the potential, not climate, but the implications to the environment.
Yeah. So these systems are expensive I mean, they take a lot of power and they take a lot of computing power. So it literally costs a lot of money to run these, and money is basically energy. So right now they are very expensive, and building these models, especially building them, is very expensive. Once they're built, you can run things on them much more efficiently. It's really the building stage, what's called the training stage, that's the expensive part. There's continual efforts to make those things cheaper. And I mean, you could argue that there is an Islamic problem here, and especially us using it in this way, but you could also argue that there's an incrementality question. Like if you took all of the energy, the incremental energy or the marginal energy required to run Ansari, it's still like it's way less than a megawatt hour or something, probably $4 or $5 of electricity. So it really is that kind of question of this technology is present, the models have already been trained, so it's just the inference cost. How do you think about that? I don't have an answer, but I do know that there's techniques on the horizon, reversible computing, quantum computing, analog approaches that also have the quantization approaches that have significant opportunities to reduce the cost of that computation by 10-fold or 100-fold.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask a question, actually. No, not a question. I want to make a comment, rather. I deleted the question. The comment is this, that without having rules for interpretation of the Quran, employing AI, we cannot have a translation. I agree with Waleed that we cannot have proper translation, not even use AI for the translation. Second, in my opinion, the old tafsir, the old interpretation are almost out of date, in my opinion. Introducing AI into the studies of the Quran needs new qualification of the interpretation of the Quran. And I will talk in the afternoon today. There must be, in my opinion, new rules which conform with the technology of AI, and worthwhile to use AI then into such interpretations. That's my comment. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. If such rules were to exist, I would be happy to, and the community agrees on them, I'd be happy to use them, and it may not even be that hard to introduce them.
I'll have to say something here and interfere, Dr. Atta. I agree with you, and it's not one person job, it's a committee job. That's why Iqra created a committee with many scholars. Dr. Atta is a member of that committee, Quran scholars and scientists in various fields of science. that committee should create those rules. I totally agree with Dr. Attai, but that's the job of that committee, and with the participation of Quran translators. That's why we're having this conference, so we can all meet each other, come together, put our heads together, and come out with something, you know? So this is basically why we have this conference. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
but Dr. Qasqas, there are priorities. First, I
Yes.
think there
Yes.
is a need for the rules for interpretation, and
Yes.
then we can set up the rules for translation.
Yes.
And this needs time. You know, there is a time gap between the two
Yes.
stages.
Yes.
As I will show in my short talk in the afternoon, I have set some rules, which is very advanced, which is also utilizing some ideas from quantum mechanics, for example, since the Quran contains fuzzy logic, as Dr. Muhammad Zaki Muhammad Khudra has already pointed years ago. Fuzzy logic in the Quran we have sometimes, allegorical text. How can we deal with that unless you use advanced concepts before the technology, advanced concepts, and then you bring Dr. Walid and his team of AI specialists. Thank you.
Yes, please. Assalamu alaikum. So my question Brother Dr. Walid. So my question to you is that I have a little experience with AI, and I understand that the system default question, the instruction given to AI is that I am your assistant helper or helping assistant. So if that's going to be the same instruction, default instruction in the AI tool that you have created, Ansari, and also if that is the case, then of course it's going to bring out all the references whenever a question is being asked. So is it possible that people who have worked on the translation, they should be interacting with the system first? It should be shared with few people so that they can answer, and maybe if the system can accept an error from the people who are, listening to the answer, and maybe, we disagree with the answer because we know better than the system itself. So that can probably lead to some correction and then add to the knowledge base of the system. What do you think about that?
Yes, that's actually the next stage of Dr. Sahib and my work, which is what's called translation is very flexible because it's well defined.
It is.
So
right.
The correct, or whatever you want to call the correct, or the preferred, let's use the term preferred translation,
right,
can be used to fine tune a model to make it sound like or have the characteristics of the translation that you have given it as a reference. Excuse me. We've done initial experiments on this actually to check that this approach works by taking better translations of hadith and applying them, using them to fine tune a model. By a model, I mean the translation system, to give better translations of other books of hadith. It kind of sort of works, but you need to make sure that you train the data, that the reference information that you gave it is high quality. And that's essentially what, where the problem is now. Often the translations we give to these systems to fine tune them are not high quality enough to make them better than what they would produce naively. And the curation and the production of those high quality, and that's kind of the problem, a little bit that, it's kind of a question mark in the work that Dr. Sahib and I did, is because, well, is the translation, anyway. But my point is it can be done. What you're proposing can be done in a specific case of translation and done reliably. It's a little bit harder to do in the case of open-ended question answering.
That's right. And what if just restricting it to giving references only, so that the person asking the question can just receive references, and then they can, arrive at their own judgment on on their own. So,
that's
for instance,
possible.
Yeah. If we restrict AI, if your model, it's restricted and constrained to that, so that it doesn't create something, like you said, hallucinate something which is totally, off track and based on whatever it thinks. And so it can just lead to, let's say, for instance, if we just restrict to Quran, and if we are asking about any one topic, salat or zakat or anything, so it can just bring out all the ayat, relevant ayat, and just with the, just restricted translations also to start off with, so that anybody who reads it will get a very wholesome concept of what is being, where all the ayat are. And yeah.
That's definitely possible. But the question is, yeah, that's definitely possible. You can definitely restrict it and constrain it. But there's so much benefit from, I mean, one thing that one thing I fear is that we keep comparing AI to some platonic ideal, forgetting that humans themselves are always so flawed. So I mean, for example, when humans do the Batik test, that test of 100 questions, they get answers wrong on that too, even the highly qualified scholars. So the question is, how good to perfect do you want it to be? One way to think about it is the spectrum of that is the worst student that would graduate from an Islamic academy. That's the minimum bar, right? And then the maximum bar is superhuman performance. The question is, where in the line, like obviously, it shouldn't be like the worst person to ever graduate from an Islamic academy, obviously. But where is the line between useful and perfection, given that humans themselves are not perfect? And so what I'm worried about is missing out on that utility in the meantime of giving these, I mean, I don't know where else I would go to kind of, like, that's a kind of a tricky question to answer. What's the difference between ikhtara and istafa and ishtaba, which when they, all three of them basically mean choose. Why is Allah using different words? And something that would go and get all of the verses, and then the real magic is the real power is the synthesis, right? So again, I could come back to you. Ansari has a stage when it queries the hadith, where it can come back from 30 hadith, with 30 hadiths in the search results. It will then pick the two of those 30 hadith that specifically answer the question. And that's the power of these systems. So yes, we could constrain it. That's why, for example, think of Ansari as a testbed that's kind of at one extreme of what's possible. There are definitely more conservative options, and it's up to us to decide where to kind of set that bar.
That's right. Thank you so much.
I do see that there is one question in the chat from John asking if a more incremental approach is required when it comes to AI and the Qur'an. Any thoughts on that?
That's a very, very deep question. I don't feel qualified to answer it. But let me present both sides. So one is, of course, we could be incremental, right? And historically, if you look at, maybe this is a bit controversial to take, but historically with Islam and technology, we have been late to adopt new technologies. If you think about satellite TV or internet or mobile phones, first we start by saying it's evil and it's haram. Well, not quite evil or haram, but there's something wrong with it. And then we gradually accept it, maybe 5 years after the world has already kind of moved on and started using that technology. What I fear is by taking an incremental approach, there's good in the caution, but there's also a risk of us missing out on the benefits of taking this technology and moving with it as fast as the technology moves. And there's also kind of well, it's happening anyway. Other people are going to answer questions about Islam. We might as well have that. And that train is moving and moving very fast. So we can't, to some extent, it's an unrealistic option to be incremental when everything else is moving so fast. But I definitely see both sides of this. It's definitely, a very nuanced question, and one that requires discussion and conferences and discussions like this to discuss.
Thank you very much. I just want to ask that, Dr. Wali, did you work with the translation in non-Latin languages such as Arabic, Persian, or Urdu as well? If yes, what was the results of your model?
We have. Probably the most extensively tested is Turkish. The results have been overall very good. Translation into English is better than translation from English to other languages or Arabic to other languages. It's basically a function of how much of the internet is in that language. So the more that there's content in English in that language, in particular what are called parallel texts, the better the translation will be. We have not done any kind of scientific tests. It's more informal and anecdotal tests. be very happy to interested if you have access to populations that could use our system for Urdu. And it could be that he gives the correct answers in English, but the wrong answers in Urdu. So I'd be very interested in exploring that kind of question.
Thank you, Medina. Assalamu alaikum to everyone who's just joining. I have a few questions ethically, and Dr. Waleed's response to my question, I completely understand what he's saying with regards to the fact that this train is moving, it's moving quickly, and so we may as well kind of get on board and at least have some say in how the technology is applied. But I'm of the mind, and I frequently get branded a Luddite for my views on AI and other technologies, but I don't view AI, for example, as being completely deterministic or even inevitable. Like, I think that if we are going to get on this train, that we should probably be, as Muslims, we have a moral and ethical obligation to invest as much in the mitigation of climate impact as we do in the technology itself, so that at least we are being consistent with regards to our views. And I understand what Dr. Waleed said with regards to the idea of creating the models and then the models themselves becoming more efficient. But I'm also concerned that given this moment in human history and how fragile things are with regards to climate, we've had two of the hottest days in history this year. I wonder if we should be a little bit more insistent about the potential ethical and ecological impacts. My two other concerns have more to do with the fact that applications like this have been used, for example, for surveillance in the past. And that gives me a great deal of pause because, again, we're at this very strange place, particularly in the Western world, where surveillance and Islamophobia and even the potential for this application to fuel that with misinformation. Again, I recognize there are mitigated measures available, but it does concern me that if you look at, for example, the United States, we have had the largest increases in military and surveillance in the history of this country. And the fact that other applications have been used to gather this data is also sort of concerning. And I think that we need to look at that ethically. And so I do have some other ethical concerns. And I think more from an altruistic perspective, which is AI in general is being used more or less to produce or create pressure on working and middle class people with regards to their professions. So there are more people in this country now working second jobs than ever. And there are more and more people who are losing their jobs as a result of AI. For example, I'm a designer. I have friends who are designers, many of whom are losing contracts, who are not being hired. So I think even as an extension of that, one of the great things about Islam for me is not just my direct connection to the Creator, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but also to other people. And I also appreciate what Dr. Waleed said about how this is not going to replace translators. But I think if we're looking at a singularity or a series of smaller singularities, I think the potential for AI to come between ourselves and other members of our community, right? Like even now when we go out to dinner, we're like looking at our phones instead of talking to people around us. And I think that translation, the recitation, the interaction with one another is really a big part of why I reverted, years ago. So I wonder about that potential impact. I don't make necessarily any predictions about it, but it's one of those things I think should be present in all of our minds as we move towards this moment.
Yeah. So if that's a whole topic. We could talk about that for an hour, but let me give 3 responses to the 3 different things. Climate change, definitely an issue, but AI can be used to help solve climate change and is now being used in research for chemicals, for example. Its use in quantum chemistry, for example, is kind of one of the, and drug design and other things is also one of the goods that's coming out of it. With respect to it being used for surveillance, absolutely, that is a risk. One of the saddest examples for me is the use of Project Lavender by the Israeli military to target innocent civilians in Palestine. If you haven't read up on that, it's required research for anyone who's considering doing work for AI. And then the third one, it reminded me of your third argument, Austin. It was about the way that can you just repeat the third argument? that you had?
I think I was just mentioning that there is the potential for there to be help in our communities.
So I mean, this is one of the dangerous things about AI. One of my concerns with AI is it reveals the weaknesses and cracks in a society, and it flicks them wide open. So if you would see that in Western society, one of the issues is the misdistribution of wealth. AI will perpetuate that if we allow it to. The way I see it is AI is one of the technologies that will massively boost human productivity. Now, that will create a surplus, what you might call the AI surplus. The question is, what do we do with that? Do we give it to the rich, or do we use this to give everyone in the world a universal basic income? The answer in the West is very clearly the former. But I like to imagine that there's a social world where it's possible, where some of the steps towards the second one are possible. So it's like there's kind of a technical question overlaid with a sociological question about the distribution of wealth. And that's what AI is exposing in terms of a weakness or a crack in Western society, in my opinion.
I was a late user of a computer. I started using computers in 1991. I didn't see the need to use a computer before that. But then I realized how mistaken I was by being a late user. And in order to correct my mistake, I went to the Azhar of Lebanon and met with the Mufti, the guy in charge of that university. And I said, look, I want you to avoid the mistake I made. You're still not using computers to teach all these people that will be the leaders, future leaders of our society in Lebanon. So why don't you start using computers? Well, he told me we don't have the resources, this, that, and the other, and asked me to explain why I think this is necessary. By the time I got through convincing him, it was a little bit too late as far as I'm concerned. Out of the same experience, I want to urge everybody. This is why we have this conference. So we tell everybody how, look, AI is going to be everywhere, whether you want it or not. AI is a daily fact of life today, and it's moving much faster than our own expectation. So if you think you're gonna take 6 months to think about whether to use AI or not, you'll be out of the game. The time is now. We're already late holding this conference. We need to bring to everybody's attention how important it is to go into their own community and urge the community to start learning about AI and using AI. And if we don't do this, we're not doing our duty in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I know the need to go and listen to what the Qur'an says about this, to what the Hadith say about this, and what the Muftis will tell us about it. Safi Kaskas has something else to tell you. If Israel is using it, you need to use it. Shame on us if we don't use it. At least a'addu, at least prepare yourself, at least get ready. And I don't see any need to spend hours in thinking about whether to use AI, whether not to use AI. You have to use AI if you want to survive in this world. I hope that's very clear to everybody. Thank you very much.
Excellency, can I have a chance?
Yes, go ahead, doctor. Go ahead.
Yes. Thank you very much. Actually, the philosophy behind holding this conference is that AI is not inherently incompatible with Islam. But everywhere in the world, particularly in the Christian world and in the Vatican, there are many apprehensions about the abuse or misuse of the AI in the interpretations of the religion. We are claiming that Qur'an is as it was revealed on the Prophet, peace be upon him.
Yes.
And we are proud of it. But the now new emerging challenge is understanding of the Quran and the translations of the Quran. We like or dislike, AI will have the role in the religious understandings. We are already using information technology. For example, Al-Maktaba Al-Shamila. How we collected all these things? We collected all these data and books, classical, almost every source is now available in just only in this one software. So there are many other databases also available where Urdu, Persian, English, French, German books are available. So AI is the new reality of the contemporary world, and unfortunately, traditional Islamic institutions, my university, Al-Azhar University, and other Islamic universities, they are silent on that issue. They are still in the situation of denial. This is the reason we are late. For last 2-3 centuries, this is the one of the main cause of the downfall of Islamic civilization. Whatever new is coming, we remain in denial situation. For years, we don't accept it. But at the same time, we started using it. There are still many people, traditional ulama, who are rejecting the use of television screens. And the world has moved from 60s black and white television to where at that present time. So we need to have, as Professor Kaskas always saying, a futuristic vision. Without having futuristic vision, we cannot dream even for the revival of Islam. If we wanted to have a renaissance of Islam, we need to have futuristic vision. And that futuristic vision can be through such type of consultative meetings. Here, no one can deny, even if we deny that artificial intelligence is not important, we don't need it, blah, blah, blah. It will come. People will use it, particularly the young Muslim students who are studying informatics, who are studying computer sciences, who are working as professionals, they will keep using it. So the importance is that we should understand and we should give ethical guidelines how that AI can be used to understand religious teachings and the text of the Quran and the translation of the Quran. And another important that Professor Basel has pointed out, that we have not only to make ethical values for the understanding and the utilization of the AI, we have to provide substance with technological advancement.
Yes.
Because if softwares have to be prepared by the non-Muslims, softwares have to be prepared by the people who don't believe on Quran, and they are collecting the data of Quran, then there will be serious challenges for us, for Muslims, to preserve the sanctity of the Quran. So on the one hand, I'm just concluding. On the one hand, we need to understand that there is no other option than to move forward with the science and technology, but just not to be the consumers of the science of technology. We need to put our energy in the substance and in preparation of the softwares that can save destruction of understanding, destruction of the sources, and destruction of the text of the Quran. You can understand in Germany, they have established institution for the research on Quran before the Second World War, and that institution still continue working on Quran. Is there any parallel institution in the Muslim world? The answer is no. So I think this is the collective thinking of Dr. Safi Kaskas and some of his friends, that we should move forward and we should keep it on. We should move forward, and we should ask young Muslim professionals to work on substance, and we should ask Muslim religious leaders to put ethical guidance that can help us to utilize artificial intelligence, not only in understanding of the Quranic text, but also in understanding of the text of Hadith. There are opportunities and there are challenges. Challenges are less, opportunities are more, but we should not miss this chance. Thank you.
Dr. Qasqas will be interested in that. Years ago, we had some Western scholars from Cambridge University and from Harvard University and from Stanford University visiting Jordan, and we had a session years ago, about 5 years ago, on introducing hermeneutics in the Quran, hermeneutic studies of the Quran. And I was opposing that. Why? Because we don't have the rules and the methodology to do that. Why we don't have the rules and methodology? Because the Quran is a different text. It is not a text like a story, one unit. One thing very important when you employ or subject a text to a hermeneutic study, one very important requirement is wahdatun nas, the unity or the uniformity of the text. If the text is not uniform, then you can't do that. And I gave them examples, several examples. After that, they agreed, yes, it is very, very difficult to employ or subject the Quran to hermeneutic studies. But when I go back, I also remind them that our method in Arabic and Islamic approach is the ta'wil al-Arabi, the Arabic interpretation, which has been set by many scholars. Most prominent of them is Imam Abu Hamid al-Ghazali. Abu Hamid al-Ghazali have specified very detailed, methodology of his time for the interpretation of the Quran. But if you come now back to the question of our age need to regenerate new things, a new methodology. The old methodology is no longer efficient enough to perform the task. It's not efficient. I don't say the old methodology is not useful. We should throw it to the bin. No, not that. Not that at all. It is basis. It will stay basis. But we have to build a new structure also. We have to extend many aspects of the Quran to be covered or subjected to such studies. So today I was thinking that, well, isn't it by putting my new rules of interpreting the Quran, is I am approaching somehow or agreeing to a hermeneutic study? Yes, could be. But this is not an easy way of looking at hermeneutics as it is in the Western pool of text. I mean, it's not the same as subjecting the Old Testament to such study. It's different because the text in this case, in the two cases, is different. The main text, and to say that it is not a uniform text is a big problem for anybody who want to. That's why when we had this symposium in Amman in 2018, and three big scholars, they came to discuss this subject, including Arif Naif, Dr. Arif Naif, who is specialist in hermeneutics. He agreed with me, that it is not easy to do that. Now the point is that if you want to employ the full power of AI, then you have to also see the full power of the Quran.
Yes, indeed.
I mean, to match. Thank you.